Thank you, Can Corla. Minister, the unspeakable murder of George Floyd, I think, has shocked us. But it must not shock us into silence, because racism unchallenged is racism encouraged. And I think we as a state have to make sure that our words, our public statements, challenge racism, condemn racism and all who perpetrate it. Otherwise, our silence is encouragement. And while I recognise it's delicate and it can be a fine line, nonetheless, as a sovereign state, we have a responsibility to make our position crystal clear, because the words we use speak not only to the world, but also to ourselves. As well as that, Minister, I do want to take the opportunity that many TDs have taken today, and that's to thank you and your department for your genuine efforts and, as far as I know, successful efforts to bring home all of those who were stranded due to the COVID-19 crisis. And indeed, I have to say, and I'm happy to say, that it's been my experience over many years when I was in the European Parliament to see how Irish embassies, consulates, staff here in Dublin and various ministers worked tirelessly to help Irish citizens who are abroad. And I think sometimes that's not fully recognised here, and I would just like to put it on the record. I have two questions, Minister. The first is around passports, and I think you said earlier that online applications start next week, and I just want to check with you, Minister. I know two people who've put in online applications, a couple at the same time. One of the passports has been returned. The other, the application process is finished, but it sits there in the passport office. From next week, can one expect that that passport will be sent back? You spoke of Brexit earlier and the huge challenge of a no-deal Brexit. Today we heard about our 6 billion overall deficit and 750,000 people unemployed. So there are huge challenges facing us. But in the context of Brexit, there is a possibility, and I won't go stronger than that, but there's a very real possibility that we may default to WTO trading rules. And perhaps the most vulnerable sector there is agriculture. So I just want to ask you, what forward planning is happening both at national level and at European level to protect agriculture from the shocks of WTO rules? And if you can't do it today, perhaps you might also tell me what differences would there be between East-West trade and cross-border trade in the event of WTO rules applying? And finally, the European Commission has relaxed rules around state aid. This has the possibility to benefit larger countries and larger companies disproportionately. And I want to ask you, have you any concerns around that? Thank you.
Number of questions there with just about a minute and a half.
Yeah, the state aid issue actually is a very probing and good question in terms of how states use new flexibilities around state aid, because of course some countries have an awful lot more available resources to be able to spend in the absence of strict state aid rules than others do, and therefore they could potentially create competitive advantage within a single market. And I think that is a concern. And it's something that I think we need to watch quite closely. In relation to the passport question, I can give you a quick answer. I mean, from next week on, we should have the online passport application process working as normal, and people getting passports back within 2 or 3 days. And so if there's an application stuck in the system, that should be released from next week on. In relation to no-deal planning, yeah, I mean, you know, we are, of course, planning for a worst-case scenario. We'll be putting in place a new communication strategy to reach out to businesses as we did before. But the truth is we have to do this in a clever way, because many businesses are so caught up with focusing on COVID and post-COVID and trying to survive, quite frankly, and reopen over the coming months, that Brexit isn't even on their mind, and we have to find a way of getting that conversation going again, even though many people don't want to hear it, to make sure that our economy as a whole is as Brexit ready as we possibly can be for all scenarios, including a no trade deal Brexit, and we will be as ready as we can be. That doesn't mean it's not going to be difficult. It will be very difficult for some sectors. I mean, if you look at the agri-food sector on its own, you're talking about under WTO rules, over €1 billion of tariffs applying to beef and dairy trade between these two islands, which is hugely significant. But we will do everything we can to avoid that eventuality, obviously through negotiation.
Thank you.